I'm going to teach psychological suffering, what it means, from a more intuitive basis. Let's say I'm going to pull from a real case example I've had here. Let's say there's a fire and the tenants of the apartment, let's say there's 15 of them, all escape from the apartment. However, the escape is quite difficult. It's smoky, it's challenging to see. Some had to crawl out, some had to jump from their windows. The escape was tragic. Now that initial recovery phase, processing what happened, coping with it, moving on, is that psychological distress or psychological suffering? That would be psychological distress. We would expect a normal recovery phase for what has happened. It's within expectation of the event. Now, let's say, which likely was the case, that a certain percentage of the people involved go on to develop symptoms of re-experiencing what happened. They avoid any reminders of apartments or fires. They experience a wide range of negative emotions, and they constantly feel on guard, aroused, hyper-aroused when they're around any reminders of what happened. It's been more than a month or so. Is this psychological distress or psychological suffering? This, of course, would be psychological suffering because now we're going beyond what would be expected for this person's recovery. In the same way, if somebody breaks their arm, that initial recovery, as the body is physically healing and sending out physical signs of pain that are psychologically perceived, that would be psychological distress, again, within expectation. Now the person's arm is recovered, however, they still live in fear, constantly protect their arm, and avoid going out. This again would be psychological suffering. Ideally, what we learn to do, whether it's through psychotherapy, awakening, ideally a mixture of both, is we learn to manage those types of symptoms so that we never get to that point in the first place. It certainly is normal to experience a range of emotions or distress secondary to events like that. However, what we do with those responses that come to us, that's where we can make a difference. Just because you feel anxiety or you feel distress or you feel pain does not mean you have to react to it or attach to it in certain ways. This kind of teaching is more so on the psychotherapy side as opposed to the awakening side. However, from both paths, you train this ability because when you are engaging in psychotherapy or when you are trying to find your way to realize ultimate reality, find a freedom from psychological suffering, both involve finding the roots for what causes this level of distress and attachment to that distress. I would say psychotherapy primarily teaches you how to manage those roots, whereas the side of awakening teaches you how to uproot and remove those roots so that they cannot harm you again. You still have the stimulus, the experience, the emotions of what happens. I have not seen any evidence or validation for people losing their ability to feel things, which honestly I think would be maladaptive, but you'll hear those claims in spiritual literatures. I haven't found any validation for those things. More so what happens is the way those things are experienced changes, and it can change to the point where what is felt is minimal. That is probably what they are actually talking about. It's not really that the emotion goes away, it's more so that the reaction to that emotion becomes minimal. It's kind of an extinction response going on. But again, the person will still feel emotions. So hopefully that gives a little bit more of an intuitive sense of what psychological suffering means. It's kind of a face valid term anyways. People have a pretty good understanding for it. I'm not proposing that what's covered in this channel eliminates certain psychological abilities or causes you to not feel things or causes zero internal activity. That, again, I think is problematic more than anything else. However, the functions of those certainly will change, and they will change in such a way that you can control how they manifest and how you choose to engage with them, which is perhaps the most important ability to have.